Let's discuss some of these games with the man himself, NFL analyst Ryan Wilson. Let's start with that Week 1 clash between the Broncos and the Seahawks. And with Wilson talking about going to face his former team right out of the gate, Ryan, take a listen to this.
I think it's going to be an exciting time. Obviously, Seattle's meant the world to me over the past 10 years. It's a special place to play, Lumen Field. I have high regard for all those guys over there and what they do. I think for me, it's non-emotional, though. It's got to be non-emotional. You got to be able to go into it with understanding that it's just ball, and also understand that there's been amazing times. They've thrown a lot of touchdowns there. I've won a lot of games there. So I got great experience.
Ryan, many thought that he would be a Seahawk for life, but he'd hinted at change for a couple of seasons. Two teams that are headed in very different directions. I mean, he's saying all the right things, but in terms of a revenge game, what do you think about this one right out of the gate?
Yeah, I love that it's Week 1. I love the NFL did that. I was waiting, Jeremy, for the move back to Seattle for the Drew Lock comments on the revenge game from his perspective. Obviously, things didn't work out too well for him there in Denver, along with Noah Fant, who was traded. But for Russ Wilson, he said exactly what you thought Russ Wilson would say. He's from the Tom Brady school of public relations, where they talk, but nothing really is learned from those conversations. But here's sort of a fun fact for you. Russ Wilson is 1-1 in 2 games against Denver. One time he beat Peyton Manning in 2014. You love that. 4 years later, 2018, he lost to Case Keenum. How'd that happen? But that's actually the reality. Now he's in a division that's equally as tough, if not tougher, than the one he left in Seattle in the NFC West. And the question becomes, what can they do over the course of the season? It's going to start in Week 1. It feels like this is going to be a win for Denver and Russ Wilson, who left Seattle despite what he just said, because they weren't giving him what he wanted, offensive line and more autonomy when it came to throwing the football. He talked about those touchdowns he threw, reading between the lines. You got the sense that he felt like he should have thrown a few more. Instead, they ran the football, and now Seahawks are trying to figure out their quarterback situation, and Denver's quite happy with Russell Wilson.
Yeah, and as Super Bowl winning quarterback, you saw the graphic there, how Super Bowl winning quarterbacks fare when they go and face their old team. Carson Wentz, he's a Super Bowl winning quarterback with the Eagles, albeit he was an injured player that year, but still Wentz was a big part of Philadelphia's run to Super Bowl 52. He's now with the Commanders, and he gets to see his former team in Week 3. What do you think about that matchup? Not quite as high profile.
Yeah, as soccer people, Jeremy, Carson Wentz winning the Super Bowl as an injured person reminds me of Gareth Bale winning a Champions League title with Real Madrid. Yeah, he's there. Didn't do a whole lot, and that's sort of what you get when you're talking about Carson Wentz. Although, to his credit, he had a great 2017 season, that rookie campaign before he got injured, the second year in the league, and he tore his ACL. He was in the MVP running. Things have never quite worked out since, and I suppose this is a revenge game for Carson because by the way, he's adding up teams on that revenge list. Last year didn't work out in Indy. But things were going so well in Philadelphia for him. Frank Reich left. They tried that reunion last year with the Colts. That didn't work out. And now he has a chance to prove a growing list of doubters wrong. They meet in Week 3, and then they meet again in Week 10. Now, look, Carson Wentz doesn't have the aforementioned Frank Reich, but he does have Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel. They drafted Jahan Dotson. They have Antonio Gibson. They got Brian Robinson as well in the draft. So there's sort of you're running out of excuses, and you're playing in a division that's not too good. So there are a lot of reasons for optimism if you're trying to take the glass half full approach for Carson Wentz, but recent history tells us this may not work out.
Yeah, and Ryan's saying Week 3 and Week 10 for the matchup. Wentz is going to get to see his former team twice in divisional play. All right, the GOAT and a player that many were calling Baby GOAT faced off in Super Bowl 55. Of course, talking about Pat Mahomes and Tom Brady. The GOAT winning the ring. Brady and Mahomes haven't played against each other since, but, they did appear as cover athletes on the latest version of Madden together. Chiefs are in Tampa in Week 4. That seems like a pretty tasty matchup, Ryan.
Yeah, tasty matchup and tough matchup for the Chiefs. So the last time they got together in Super Bowl 55, Todd Bowles, the defensive coordinator, who is now the head coach in Tampa Bay, put it to Patrick Mahomes, primarily with that front four of the Buccaneers getting after an injury-riddled offensive line for Kansas City. What did Kansas City do? Last year they went out and fixed the offensive line. They continue to bolster that unit, and I think that Mahomes and the Chiefs and that offense will be ready when they go to Tampa Bay. Now, Todd Bowles will be ready too, and the Chiefs will be without Tyreek Hill, who will be in Southern Florida. But at the end of the day, I think the Chiefs may be a better football team in Week 4 of this upcoming season than they were at the end of that playoff run in the Super Bowl against the Buccaneers, only because they were so banged up. We'll see how this plays out. This is Tom Brady 2 years later. Still feels like the same player that won that Super Bowl, but I do wonder if his attention is elsewhere in terms of thinking about buying sports teams and looking to get more involved in the Hollywood side of things in terms of production and perhaps even acting. So we'll see how that plays out. And don't forget, a year ago, the first month of the season, even the first 6 weeks, the Chiefs are 500, so their schedule sets up where they could start out slow and then get red hot again. So it wouldn't surprise me if they go to Tampa Bay and lose that football game, but I can guarantee that they'll be ready to get after it against Tom Brady, given the last time they met, how that ended up in the loss in Super Bowl 55.
The Chiefs are the only team that are on your list twice. They also host Buffalo in Week 6. This is a great matchup regardless of the revenge factor, but what is the revenge factor here?
Well, 13 seconds is the first thing that comes to mind, how the Bills had the lead and they somehow allowed the Chiefs to score at the end of that football game and settle things. Also, the other thing to keep in mind, this game was so out of control, bonkers, crazy. Yeah. They changed the overtime rules because the Chiefs got the ball scored and won in overtime, and there it is right there, that they came back and changed it now that each team gets a possession. Although, again, all you're doing is pushing sudden death down the road a little bit. So 2 teams get possession in overtime, and then if the teams are still tied, then it's sudden death. Basically what we're doing, you're just giving each team one opportunity. We'll see how that works out. But at the end of the day, 2 of the best players in the NFL going throw for throw, blow for blow. It was such a fantastic football game that it's hard to imagine that there was an AFC divisional matchup, not a Super Bowl or a conference matchup. But we'll get to see that again, and it's going to be exciting football. Probably not quite this exciting. And fingers crossed, maybe it goes to overtime. We'll get to see how it plays out once again.
Yeah, we'll get another coin toss game. We talk about players getting their revenge games. So do head coaches. Mike McCarthy's going to go to Lambeau in Week 10 to face the Packers. Another good game where the revenge factor just simply adds some spice.
Yeah, that's right. So Mike McCarthy has a street named after him just around the corner from Lambeau Field. So that'd be a nice homecoming for him to go stand, get his picture taken underneath the street sign with a W. We'll see. Now, there's a reason that Mike McCarthy is no longer in Green Bay, and the 2 words that come to mind are Aaron Rodgers. They won a Super Bowl together, but the offense was considered stale. Aaron Rodgers reportedly wasn't happy with how things were going, so they bring in Matt LaFleur, and that team takes off. They win 13 games every year no matter what. Last year, the Cowboys struggled primarily because of, 2 years ago because of injuries to Dak Prescott. Last year they were much better, except when they got to the playoffs in that last play there that cost them a chance to move on. We'll see how this goes. Mike McCarthy took a year off after he was run out of Green Bay. Sort of regrouped there and came back pretty well in Dallas. But I think this is still Aaron Rodgers' football team in Green Bay, no matter the fact that McCarthy does, in fact, have a street named after him, and they won a Super Bowl together. This is all about Aaron Rodgers and what could be, by the way, his last season in Green Bay.
Lastly, the Titans and Bengals will meet in Week 12. We all remember how the Titans blew it in the dying minutes of that AFC divisional game last year. More of a revenge game for Ryan Tannehill or the Titans as a whole here? What do you think, Ryan?
No, I think it's Ryan Tannehill first and foremost. So it's Week 12, and again, it's another divisional matchup. It was the Titans coming off that bye. No one outside of John Breach thought that the Bengals had a chance in that football game, and the exact opposite happened. Ryan Tannehill started playing poorly with an interception, then he ended with an interception on a play that you're watching here that ended the Titans' hopes, and it kept the Bengals' hopes alive all the way to the Super Bowl. So this is a prove me moment again for Ryan Tannehill, who's had a ton of them in his career, mostly when he was in Miami. Things have gone pretty smoothly since he came over to Tennessee. But here's the other issue, Jeremy. This is Week 12, and if things are rocky early on for Ryan Tannehill, and I don't expect they will be, their schedule sets up pretty well for him. Maybe we see Malik Willis at this point, and then the Ryan Tannehill revenge game factors out the window. I don't think we see Malik this early, but just something to keep in mind to make a mental footnote of, because if the Titans struggle, if Ryan Tannehill struggle, it may be Joe Burrow against Malik Willis as opposed to the rematch of Joe Burrow versus Ryan Tannehill.
Ryan, I'm curious as to why we don't see the Deshaun Watson revenge game on your list.
It was on there, but here's the issue. We don't know how long he's going to be suspended for and when it's going to happen. It would make some sense. Obviously, the Browns and the Texans are going to meet up later in the season. I just wasn't certain about whether what we're going to find out about the suspension. The NFL hasn't weighed in yet. You would imagine that's coming soon, only because teams need to prepare, and folks in Cleveland, for example, probably want to make some season ticket purchases, and it probably is based on what happens with that Deshaun Watson suspension. So that was my thinking there. It's certainly in the running. I just didn't have a clear idea of what his availability would be, Deshaun Watson, at the moment that we're doing this thing.
Yeah, depending on what the suspension is, if there is one. I mean, 4 games, 6 games. It's a Week 13 matchup, so perhaps an amendment to the list depending on what we see down the road.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.